Our next speaker is Brandon Arnold, who is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Taxpayers Union. He was previously Director of Government Affairs at Cato and Manager of External Affairs in former Maryland Governor Robert Ehrlich's Energy Office, and Senior Legislative Aide to Representative James Sensenbrenner. And with that, I think I'll just, you can read the rest of it. He's done lots of good things.
Thank you. Let's see how we can move this thing.
Just talk loud.
Just talk loud, all right.
Yeah, it works.
With a fairly deep voice, I'll try to speak loudly here for y'all. Well, thanks for having me here today. This is really enjoyable. I love learning more about issues like this. And it was one of the things I found particularly interesting was Barry mentioning that everybody travels about or commutes about an hour a day, which I thought was really interesting as someone who commutes about 2 hours a day. I was wondering how that works out. And then I realized that my wife commutes about 10 minutes a day. So we average it out, and in there I guess we have roughly an hour a person. I have talked to her, incidentally, about trying to make a more equitable distribution of these commuting times, and her reaction is very similar to y'all's right there. So, in any event, I'm very pleased to be part of this conference and this discussion. What I'm going to talk to you about is how to communicate your ideas to Capitol Hill, to members of Congress and their staff. And so I'm not going to talk too much about transportation, at least as a policy subject, but more just generally about government affairs strategies. Interestingly, a lot of people look at public policy problems kind of like an algebra problem. They want to find out the solution to this problem, whether it's traffic congestion, how to get people from point A to point B, how to create an equitable tax system that helps economic growth and job creation. Whatever the public policy problem is, we have good folks like Randall and the great people at Cato trying to come up with solutions to them. And that's a very, very important part of the overall policy problem, or the overall policy discussion, but it's not sufficient for legislative change. One of my former colleagues at Cato always gives an anecdote about how he would come up when he first got to Washington. I don't remember what the subject matter was, but he came up with a solution to a public policy problem. He wrote it down in a beautiful 40-page white paper, and he was like, okay, we've got the solution. Here it is. Take it to Capitol Hill, enact it into law, and problem solved. We'll move on to the next one. Well, based on some of your reactions, I think you can tell that's not exactly how Washington, D.C. works. It would be great if it was, but that's not the way things happen. The way I look at lobbying in government affairs, it's like a sales pitch to some extent. It's very similar to sales. It's not only critically important to know the product that you're selling, to know the subject, in this case, the subject matter, transportation, the solutions to transportation, congestion, other problems. It's also important to know who you're trying to sell the product to. If you ignore that part of the equation, you're going to have a really, really tough time. It doesn't matter if you're selling the fanciest, nicest car in the world at a great price. If you're not paying attention to the person that's walking into your showroom and not understanding their unique needs and their concerns, then you're giving yourself a tougher battle than you ought to. So I think as part of this conference, you guys are all going to actually go to Capitol Hill. Is that correct? Are you going to be meeting with legislators? Some will be meeting with legislators? Okay. How many folks here are going to be meeting with members of Congress and their staff for the first time as part of this conference? Cool. Good. You guys all have some experience talking to members and staff then. Excellent. So maybe some of this will be too rudimentary for you. Let me talk a little bit about what Randall, the kind of thought experiment that he wanted to tackle here, and that is he has a solution for how to address transit funding in a better fashion, and that is moving from this open bucket where the most powerful members reach in and grab as much money as they possibly can out, and then the more junior members, the people that aren't on the relevant committees, are left with the scraps, moving to more of a formula-based funding. It's something that certainly we should pursue, but it's an uphill battle for obvious reasons. So let's say you're meeting with members of Congress. You have this solution to public policy problem, and you want to bring it to Capitol Hill. 535 members of Congress. You all are busy individuals. How do you tackle this? Well, the first thing is obvious. You want to meet with the members of the relevant committee the best you can. That's the Transportation Infrastructure Committee on the House side and the Commerce, Science, Transportation Committee on the Senate side. So you want to target those members, of course. But the thing I always emphasize above that is actually targeting your own members, targeting the House member that represents you and the 2 senators that represent you in your home state. Even if they're not on the relevant committees, this should be your starting point, because these are the people that purport to represent your concerns and your needs. Whether they do so or not effectively, often's the case that they don't, but these are the people that work for you. And that should be your first meeting. And when you get in the door there, I would hope and urge you to see if you can make them your legislative champion, or at least to point you in the direction of folks that may be your legislative champion. And what I mean by legislative champion is the person that's going to ultimately take this issue under their wing, under his or her wing, and run with it. That's absolutely critical for legislative success. You guys can be tremendously effective from the outside, but you also need somebody running the inside game, somebody who knows the relationships on Capitol Hill, who knows who are the relevant players on these critical issues. Oftentimes it's just the relevant chairman, Schuster in the House, and forgot the Commerce. Rockefeller, that's right, Rockefeller on the Senate side. But it's oftentimes a lot more complicated. There's niche issues within transportation, and you have different movers and shakers there. So research the issue tremendously well, but also do your best to research the legislative history and the players. You can do so a little bit from an outsider's perspective. You can understand a little bit about who's been introducing similar bills, perhaps. Have these bills moved in the Senate? Have they moved in the House? Have they gone through the committee process? Who's voting for it? Who's voting against it? And that'll help winnow that list of 535 members down when you see who are more likely to be your champions, down to a smaller, more manageable set of members of Congress that you can meet with. Also, as you're approaching these folks, whether you think they're going to be with you or whether you think they might be somewhat resistant, try to present them with information that is personally relevant to them. That usually means, how is this going to impact their district or state? If you have that level of granular detail, you're going to be much better off. Providing national statistics is all well and good, but at the end of the day, these men and women care about re-election more than anything. And if you can show that, listen, that your state is absolutely getting hosed when it comes to transit funding, moving to a transportation-based formula is going to put you guys in a much better position. Well, even if that's not the way that you would personally want to sell this policy change to them, that's going to resonate with them a lot more strongly than just nationally aggregated figures. So if you can get district level information, great. If you can get nearby municipalities, how it would affect them, that's fantastic. The more personal you can make it, the better off you're going to be. One thing that I always tell people, you guys seem to all have at least a little bit of experience meeting with members. One thing that often frustrates people who don't have as much experience is when they fly out to Washington, they're all excited, they've got on their calendar a meeting with an influential member of Congress, they get into the office and they ultimately get bumped to a staff level meeting. Happens all the time, it's happened to me hundreds and hundreds of times. And I can understand why that's disappointing, especially people that may have flown hours to get out to Washington. But it's not something to be disheartened about. That's just the way kind of Washington works. Nothing to take personally, typically. There's so much that happens in Washington with regard to unpredictable votes, committee proceedings, and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That you can get bumped to staff, and it's not really the worst thing in the world. A lot of times the staff that you're dealing with, depends from office to office, but a lot of times the staff that you're dealing with is going to be very, very knowledgeable and very, very influential when it comes to influencing how the member of Congress is going to vote and the bills that they're going to introduce. Another thing I like to emphasize in these meetings is, like sales, like any kind of profession that depends on interpersonal communications, personal relationships are really the key to success on Capitol Hill. So what does that mean for you guys? Well, when you walk into an office and you're meeting with the staff, you're meeting with the member, that research that you did, not just on the issue, but on the member of Congress, ought to include some personal little tidbits. Is this person, is this member of Congress in Wisconsin a huge Packers fan? Well, if they are, it might be worthwhile to check the box score. Did the Packers just blow out the Bears the week before? Because you throw that out there and maybe you loosen up the conversation and show that you care a little bit about them, and you're not just there to ask them to co-sponsor a bill or what have you. Finding those personal connections to the member or the staff is also going to pay dividends when you do follow-up. As a staff member, I would literally have days where I would meet with 12 different groups, 15 different groups even, some in a single day. Just a non-stop conveyor belt of people coming in, asking stuff for you, and leaving. And if you don't separate yourself in some fashion, I hate to say it, but you're not going to leave as much of a lasting imprint as you would like. So having a conversation about, Aaron Rodgers throwing 3 touchdown passes, maybe just a little bit enough to differentiate you from the previous groups that have been in there, and then use that little tidbit of information when you do your follow-up work. And follow-up work is absolutely critical. If you're not going to bother doing the follow-up work, I don't know if it's even worth having the meeting sometimes. Getting in and doing that follow-up work, making the phone calls or preferably emails to them, to these staff members, is really critical for continuing the momentum that you're building in your discussion. When you do that follow-up, mention those little personal anecdotes, because again, they've met with so many people. If you say, you throw out that anecdote about the Packers, or about a conversation you had when, as a kid vacationing in Door County, Wisconsin, and whatever kind of personal information that you've been able to exchange with them, throwing that out there again help differentiate you and help build that personal relationship that's so critical. I touched on a little bit, follow-up is so important. Make sure that you're getting the business card of the staffer that you meet with, or the member of Congress that you meet with. I like to often take notes on the back of it, say, this person is vaguely familiar with the issue, his boss co-sponsored HR 2335 in the last Congress, look it up, and then I can go back and do some research before I do my follow-up communication there. And also make sure that you're leaving something behind with every meeting that you have. One-pagers are the way to go, really. The 40-page white paper is fantastic. The likelihood that a staffer or a member of Congress is going to read it is rather low. There are some that do. It varies from office to office, but it's awfully low. That one-pager they will read. They will digest that information, and you're going to be much better off with that truncated version of what you want to leave behind. One other thing I'll mention before wrapping up here is try to make your ask as clear as possible. This kind of relates back to the one-pager. If you have to spend 30 minutes just describing what you're asking for, less likely to have success than if it's something straightforward. If I've got Randall's proposal sketched out on a one-page paper and say, I need somebody to introduce this bill, I would love for that to be your boss, but if it's not going to be your boss, is there somebody that you work with? Is there somebody that you know of that's really interested in this particular issue that you can point me in the direction of? That clear-cut ask is going to really benefit you. Sometimes it's as simple as, will you co-sponsor this bill? Will you get behind this piece of legislation? Will you vote against this amendment? Clear, direct ask. Make it explicit. Make it simple as you possibly can. I think that's about all that I had. I guess I'm on schedule. I'm ahead of schedule. Oh, perfect. Well, I will wrap up there, and for a change, and we'll leave the rest for Q&A. Thanks.